Welcome to Geraldine's Bible and Song Sharing. I am singer and songwriter Geraldine Png. This program is to share or guide the lost in having a better understanding, personal relationship with our Lord God, Creator and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, let's join me in today's Bible messages. Thank you for joining me in sharing this Part 6 series about the song H11 and how the King James Version Bible had inspired me in writing the song. Let's take a listen to H11 again.
Stand tall, take all of everlasting, take all of ever changing. Through faith, we understand the worlds were framed by the word of God. So that thing which you see
Hebrews chapter 11 verses 8 to 19. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs of him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which had foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. And truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to have returned. But now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he had prepared for them a city. By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. About 1,000 years after the building of the Tower of Babylonia, Abram was born in the Amorite kingdom of Mesopotamia in 1900 BC. Abram, the first Hebrew, lived in Ur of the Chaldees. Later God appeared to Abram and promised him that if he would leave his country and journey to a land that he has never seen, God would make of his descendants a great nation, and through them the Savior of the world would come through his seed. Later God changed his name to Abraham, which means father of a many nations, and journeyed to the land of Canaan. The Lord also spoke a promise that anyone who blessed Abraham and his descendants would be blessed, and anyone who cursed Abraham and his descendants would be cursed. More information about the journey and places which eventually led Abraham to Canaan. Ur of the Chaldees was the original home of Abraham. It was one of the greatest cities of the ancient world, and Ur was the capital of the ancient Chaldean Empire in ancient Mesopotamia. Sometime around 1900 BC, the Lord told Abraham to leave his home and country and go to a land that he would show him. He obeyed and departed from Ur with his father Terah and his nephew Lot, mentioned in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31. Ur developed during the reign of the Sumerian kings, 3000 to 2300 BC, and had been a major city for hundreds of years when Abram was born. A ziggurat, a step temple platform about 70 feet 21 meters high, surmounted by a temple and shrine to the Akkadian moon god Sin, was built by King Ur-Nammu in 2100 BC using a solid mud brick core covered with waterproof big marked bricks. Ur-Kasdim, Sumerian city of Ur in Mesopotamia, commonly translated as Ur of the Chaldees, which is near Basra, is in modern southern Iraqi region. Haran in Mesopotamia was the first stopping place recorded in the Bible. They dwelt here until after the death of his father Terah, and in Haran the Lord called Abraham again, Genesis 12 verse 1 to 4, and Nahor, Abraham's brother, had probably settled in Haran before they departed. There is no debate over where Haran is located, 10 miles north of the Syrian border in Turkey along the Balik River, a tributary of the Euphrates River. Haran is an important Hurrian center mentioned in the Nuzi tablets. The moon god Sin was worshipped here. Genesis 11 verse 31 to 32. Terah and his family decide to move from Ur and follow the river Euphrates upstream for about 600 miles, which is 950 kilometers, to Haran. And Haran is the name of Abram's brother. So Terah apparently renamed the place Haran in memory of his son, Lot's father, who had died before the family left Ur. mentioned in Genesis chapter 11, verse 28. So Haran is one of the oldest cities on earth that is still inhabited today, founded by settlers migrating west from Mesopotamia in the 18th century BC. The city was at its peak during the Hittite Empire, based on central Anatolia in the 12th century BC. It was already centuries old when the Hittites fought Ramesses II of Egypt at the Battle of Kadesh in 939 BC. Basically, Haran is near the Altyn Basak, which is in eastern Turkey. Damascus was a great city in the ancient world, and it was located in ancient Aram, which is in Syria. Abraham and his nephew Lot had departed Haran and followed the leading of the Lord. They moved southward and passed by the city of Damascus along the way, and it might have been at this time that Abraham secured his servant Eliezer. Reference to Genesis 15, verse 2. Shechem was the first place where Abraham came to in Canaan. The Lord appeared to Abraham again and confirmed his promises, and it was here at Shechem that Abraham built the first altar to the Lord. Reference to Genesis 12, verse 6 to 7. There is much history in this place, mentioned in Joshua 24, verse 1, Judges chapter 9, verse 6, and 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 1, and Genesis chapter 12, verses 6 to 7. Abram arrives in Canaan and built an altar by the sacred tree of Moreh at Shechem, and Shechem lay in the valley between Mount Ebal to the north and Mount Gerizim. Shechem lies within modern-day Nablus, the largest city in Samaria, founded by the Roman Emperor Titus in 72 AD. The city is located on the only east-west pass through the Central Highlands at the head of the Wadi Farah, leading down to the Jordan crossing at Adam the Maya Bridge. Shechem was an important Canaanite religious center, and Abraham built an altar here to commemorate his meeting with God. Reference to Genesis 12, verse 6. While later, his grandson Jacob also built an altar here and buried his wife Rachel's household gods under the sacred oak tree. Reference to Genesis 35, verses 1 to 4. Shechem continued to be an important religious center after the conquest of Canaan under Joshua. At the end of the campaign, Joshua addressed all the people at Shechem and urged them to be faithful to the Lord their God. Reference to Joshua 24, verse 1. He renewed the covenant with God and set up a large sacred stone at Shechem to act as a witness. Reference to Joshua 24, verses 25 to 27. And in 1404 BC, Joshua died at Shechem, and the mummified body of Abraham's great-grandson Joseph, which had been brought from Egypt, was laid to rest at Shechem, where he had lived as a young man. Reference to Joshua 24, verses 32, and Genesis 37, verse 12. When the people of Israel turned to Baal after the death of Gideon in 1170 BC, they worship at the great fortress temple of Baal, Berith here, at Shechem. In reference to Judges chapter 8, verse 33. The ruins include two gateways, extensive enclosure walls and revetments, and remains of the temple of Baal, Berith, known as Migdal Shechem, the Tower of Shechem, which was burnt down by Abimelech in 1168 BC with the inhabitants of Shechem inside. Judges chapter 9, verses 46 to 49, what is believed to be the large white standing stone or Maseba set up by Joshua in 1404 BC in reference to Joshua chapter 24, verses 25 to 27, has been re-erected at the center of the archaeological site. Abraham continued his journey southward and came to a mountain near Bethel, where he built a second altar, reference to Genesis 12, verse 8. Abram moves to the hill country between Bethel and Ai. He prays to the Lord and built an altar here, then moves south towards the Negev desert. Driven by drought and famine in the land of Canaan in 1853 BC, Abram and his wife, Sarai, journey along the way of Shur to the well-watered lands of the Nile Delta in Egypt. Sarai claims to be Abraham's sister rather than his wife and is accepted into the harem of the Egyptian pharaoh, probably Pharaoh Kheti IV. Abraham receives sheep, cattle, and servants in return, but the deception is uncovered and Abraham and Sarai are forced to flee. Reference to Genesis 13, verses 1 to 9. Abraham and Sarai return from Egypt to the hill country near Bethel. The herdsmen quarrel because of insufficient pasture in this dry land. Abraham and Lot decide to separate. In reference to Genesis 13, verses 10 to 13. Lot chooses the fertile, well-watered Jordan River and pitches his tents near Sodom. Lot's choice is based on practical considerations. The grazing looks better, but the rich cities of the plain are in moral decadence. Genesis 13, verse 12. Abraham stays in the land of Canaan and settles in the Judean hill country near Bethel. The grazing here is poorer, but Abraham stays within the land where God's blessing was promised. Reference to Genesis 12, verses 1 to 3. God renews his covenant, promised to Abraham, "All this land that you see, I will give to you and your descendants forever," in reference to Genesis 13, verse 15. Egypt. Abram and his family journeyed southward through the land of Canaan, and a major famine hit. They migrated to Egypt. In Egypt, Abraham deceived the king in order to save his own life and was expelled from the land of Egypt. Reference to Genesis 12, verses 9 to 20. The king of Egypt feared Abraham because of a dream and allowed him to leave with all of his possessions. Hebron. Lot chose the warm climate and lush plains of the Jordan Valley and pitched his tent towards Sodom, and Abraham left the desirable Sodom and Gomorrah and sojourned at Hebron in Mamre, where he heard again from the Lord and built an altar. Reference to Genesis 13, verses 10 to 18. An interesting note is that Hebron was one of the oldest cities in ancient Canaan. Reference to Numbers 13, verse 22. Saying that it was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Reference to Genesis 13, verse 18. Abram moves to the great oaks of Mamre near Hebron and builds an altar there. Hebron, the meaning means confederacy, is at 3043 feet, equivalent to 927 meters, was the highest town in Palestine. Then 4 kings of the east came to Canaan, who were united under Chedorlaomer of Elam, the territory of ancient Ur, and made war against the 5 kings of Canaan. In the conquest of the Jordan Valley, they captured Lot as a prisoner of war, and when Abraham heard of it, he pursued the 4 kings and overtook them at Dan, and defeated them with the help of the Lord. Reference Genesis 14, verses 1 to 14. Abraham had assembled an army of 318 men. The city of Dan was located in the north between Hazor and Damascus. Hobah. Abraham and his army of the 7 smote the army of the 4 kings of Chedorlaomer and chased them to Hobah, which was located near Damascus. Lot and all the people with them were rescued, including their belongings. Reference to Genesis 14, verses 15 and 16. Salem. On his return, Abraham passed through Salem, Jerusalem, and was met by a man named Melchizedek, whose name means King of Righteousness. Melchizedek was a mysterious man regarded in the Bible as the priest and king of Salem. This was the first mention of the word priest in the Bible, and he gave to Abraham bread and wine. The Bible also mentions that Abraham paid him 1/10 of all his spoils from the war as a tithe. Hebrews chapter 7 verse 3 gives an interesting description of Melchizedek, and therefore his identity remains a mystery. The king of Sodom also came out to meet Abraham at the same place. Reference to Genesis 14 verses 17 to 21. Hebron. When Abraham finally returned to Hebron, God reminded him of his covenant with him and changed his name from Abram to Abraham. Reference to Genesis 15, verse 1 to 21, Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 to 27. During his stay at this place, Ishmael was born. Reference to Genesis chapter 16, verses 1 to 16. And the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. Reference to Genesis 18, verses 1 to 19. Gerar. Abraham left Hebron and for a time sojourned among the Philistines in Gerar, which was in southern Canaan, west of Beersheba. It was in Gerar that Abraham deceived King Abimelech, reference to Genesis 20, verses 1 to 18. Beersheba. Abraham remained at Beersheba for some time. During this time, he made a covenant with King Abimelech. Later, he gave birth to a natural son of him and Sarah in his old age. He named him Isaac, which means laughter. When Isaac was born, Ishmael was expelled, and his mother Hagar fled and was met by the angel of the Lord, which was the Lord himself. Reference to Genesis 21, verses 1 to 34. Moriah. It was in Beersheba that Abraham received the command from the Lord to take his only son Isaac to Mount Moriah, a mountain of Salem, to offer Isaac as a burnt offering. Reference to Genesis 22, verses 1 to 18. And back to Beersheba, Abraham returned to Beersheba and dwelt there for some time. And then he went to Hebron. Abraham bought the cave of Machpelah as a family sepulchre and buried his wife Sarah there. Reference to Genesis 23, verses 1 to 20. At the age of 175, Abraham died and was also buried in the cave at Machpelah. Abraham was of the generation of Shem mentioned in Genesis chapter 12, verses 26 to 32. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. But Sarai was barren, she had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Thank you so much. The next following week, we will continue with Genesis chapter 12 and following chapters to understand a bit more about Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 to 19. So once again, Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 to 10. By faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed, and he went out, not knowing whither he went. By faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which had foundations, whose builder and maker is God.
this world are we to stand tall? Take hold of everlasting, take hold of ever changing. Through faith, we understand the world's framed by the word of God. So that thing which you see switch to love. For he is mighty in battle and it's not for long. And on his word we just stand tall. Take hold of the sea, take hold of the changing, and go on. For he is mighty in battle and it's not for long. On his word we just stand tall. Take hold of the sea, take hold of the changing.
Thank you for tuning to Geraldine's Bible and Song Sharing with me, singer and songwriter Geraldine Png. This program is supported and sponsored by listeners like you. For information, www.geraldinepng.com. Now, until next time, remember, Jesus Christ is our Lord God, Creator and Savior.